Good evening and welcome to City Council meeting for August 25th, 2020. This meeting is being conducted in accordance with the directives from Governor Sisolak. The public is not in attendance, but we are providing a means to allow for public comment during the meeting at the appropriate time. I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order, and we will say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And normally at this time we would also be asking for any fourth graders who might be attending. School did start yesterday. So again, I know with the pandemic situation, that's making it interesting or difficult or complicated for a lot of folks, but any of those fourth graders out there, if you are taking your Nevada citizenship and you have any questions, I'm sure any member of council would be happy to talk to you about what we do here. We'll move to our public comment period. Anyone wishing to speak during this period must confine their comments to items on the agenda. Each speaker will be given up to 5 minutes to speak. Please be concise and civil in your comments. The phone number to call is 702-589-9629. And a method was also posted on the agenda where people could email public comments in prior to the meeting. Madam City Clerk, do we have any initial ones?
No, only on the second.
All right, thank you. Again, the phone number is 702-589-9629. This is the initial public comment period. Anyone wishing to speak can call 702-589-9629.
Public comment.
Yes, I'd like to make public comment.
Go ahead.
All right. This is Judy D. Shane calling in, and I would like to comment. I'm sorry I don't have the item numbers, but one of them was for the Boulder City Police Department to hire a replacement officer after some retirements coming up. I would be in favor of the police department hiring another officer at this time to get him into training and up to speed. I would also be in favor of however the police chief wants to handle the volunteer horse patrol. However he wants to handle it, I'd be in favor of. I think he knows best what his department needs and how he wants to manage his department. The third thing I'd like to comment on is I am not in favor of the executive assistant, the new position to replace the old secretary that is going out or retiring. So I would not be in favor of making this an executive assistant position. another secretary is fine. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? The line is available now. The number is 702-589-9629. This is our initial public comment period. Anyone wishing to speak may call 702-589-9629. All right, hearing no others for public comment, we will close the initial public comment period and move to approval of the regular agenda. Madam City Clerk,
No changes.
Mr. City, we do have someone for public comment.
Do you want me to answer?
Yes.
Public comment.
Yes. My name is Glenn Fan, and I'd like to speak about the police department volunteer mounted horse patrol. I'd like to see that stay if at all possible. I think it's a good asset to the city. I've seen them out and about during some of the different events around town, and I've observed other people, and they seem to be enjoy seeing the sights of the police, the policemen on the mounted horses. I think it adds a nice flavor to our town, and I think it's also an asset where I know that they've been used in searching deserts for different things. I won't go in details on them, but it seems like it's a tremendous asset to the city, especially living in the desert here. I'd like to see them stay. I think it's a good program for the city of Boulder. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll give it another minute then if there's anyone else who wishes to speak during the public comment period. The phone number is 702-589-9629. And again, due to the guidelines that are in place, public is not present here at the meeting. There is a time delay we're aware of between when things happen here in the chambers and when people see it on the live stream. So we will give a little additional latitude on public comment. The phone number again is 702-589-9629. All right, hearing no others again, we will move to the regular agenda approval. Madam City Clerk, any changes?
No changes.
Mr. City Manager
No changes.
and Mr. City Attorney? No changes. All right, Council, any changes for the regular agenda?
No changes. No changes.
All right, entertain a motion then for approval of the regular agenda.
Mayor, I move to approve the regular agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we'll move to the approval of the consent agenda. Again, Madam City Clerk,
No changes.
Mr. City Manager,
No changes.
and Mr. City Attorney.
No changes.
Thank you. Council, any changes on the consent agenda?
No. No changes.
All right, anyone wishing to offer a motion?
I move to accept the consent agenda.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, first item on the regular agenda is item number 4, presentation of the Government Finance Officers Association Certificate of Achievement. We have our Finance Director, Mrs. Pelletier.
Good evening, Diane Pelletier, Boulder City Finance Director. Boulder City has been awarded the Government Finance Officers Association, also known as GFOA, because I'm going to use these acronyms interchangeably, Certificate of Achievement in Financial Reporting for our 2019 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. CAFR, that's the other acronym. The Certificate of Achievement is the highest recognition in governmental accounting and financial reporting, and its attainment represents a significant accomplishment. This is the 29th consecutive year that the City of Boulder City has received this prestigious award. The purpose of the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report is to provide accurate and meaningful information concerning the city's financial condition and performance. The GFOA established the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting Program, the CAFR program, in 1945 to encourage and assist state and local governments to go beyond the minimum requirements of generally accepted accounting principles to prepare a comprehensive annual financial report and show that evidence the spirit of transparency and full disclosure, and then to recognize individual governments that succeed in achieving that goal. The goal of the program is not to assess the financial health of participating governments. The annual audit does that, but to rather ensure that users of the financial statements have the information they need to do so themselves. Each CAFR is reviewed using a 79-page checklist designed to determine compliance with both generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP, and program policy as established by the GFOA's Special Review Executive Committee and the GFOA Executive Board. And I do have that. This is just, I didn't print the whole 79 pages, but it's small font, so it's 79 pages. Okay. Reviews are performed by GFOA staff and members of GFOA's Special Review Committee, which comprises individuals from government, the public accounting profession, and academia who possess specialized expertise in governmental financial reporting, typically as a result of either preparing or auditing a CAFR that has received a Certificate of Achievement. Reviewers are never selected from the same state as the CAFR being reviewed or from the same firm that performed the independent audit. A certificate is awarded only if there is a consensus among reviewers that a CAFR substantially complies with both GAAP and program policy. Failure to comply with any checklist item marked by an asterisk is considered of itself sufficient evidence to justify a determination that a CAFR has failed to substantially comply with both GAAP and program policy. In certain limited circumstances, like if there's an adoption of a new standard, a CAFR may receive the award with a qualification disclosed only to the participating government. Such a qualified award puts the government on notice that failure to remedy one or more specified deficiencies in the following year's CAFR would likely result in a denial. The Boulder City CAFR has been judged by an impartial external panel to meet the highest standards of the program, which includes demonstrating constructive spirit of full disclosure to clearly communicate its financial story and motivate potential users and user groups to read the CAFR. I hope you've all read it. Many staff hours are spent compiling the comprehensive annual financial report. Work begins in early June and continues until the final report is completed in November. In addition to the finance team, all city departments are involved at some level. The certificate was awarded to the finance department. However, the certificate could not be achieved without the help from the executive, legal, and all other departments, so thank you to all who helped with this effort. At this time, I would like to extend a special thank you to Rebecca Gillis. She's a Boulder City accounting manager and a certified public accountant, so she's here in the audience. Rebecca coordinated the year-end close and worked with all departments to gather the over 100 documents needed for the report. In closing, being a Certificate of Achievement Award recipient is a big deal, and that helped Boulder City obtain a new low rate for our bond refinance done in December 2019 that saved the city over $3.5 million. So in your packet is a copy of the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting presented to the City of Boulder City and the Award of Financial Reporting Achievement presented to the Finance Department. So we would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Councilmember Folda?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want just comment real fast that I'm really happy with the financial department of Boulder City that they've been wonderful and changing how finances had been done in the past and how they are now, and how transparency has been the key to all of that. We now have an opportunity that the public can go online at any time and see our current checkbooks and our current budgets. I think that's phenomenal, and I think that's a huge change and direction in what we were doing in the past. And I know that this has not been a simple task. There's been a lot of work goes into this, especially, just being on council this short time, it's from one meeting to the next, the budget has changed. COVID changed everything. Mm-hmm. And everything that you did had to be redone again. So yep. I know that there's a ton of work that goes into all this, and I just want to give kudos to our financial department and all the hard work that it is, and just helping to make transparency a better focus and making our financial uses better known. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hoskins?
Yes, I would like to say thank you for that also. I know it's a tremendous job, and I did read almost all of those pages.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Bridges?
Not to sound redundant, but congratulations. I'm very impressed with the finance department and accounting and how hard you all work. And from the CAFR to the budgets to everything that we've been presented, everything I've seen in the last over a year that I've been sitting here, I'm just incredibly impressed with the professionalism and how well it's presented. To me, you can have all the numbers in a row, but it's about being able to understand what it means and make decisions based on that. But thank you all.
Thank you.
Councilmember Adams?
Sure, I'll join in here. Absolutely, congratulations are in order. I guess what I appreciate most about our finance department is that you guys don't just rest on your laurels. Here we've received this award, but you guys are always working towards increasing transparency, making things better, and just making really a top-notch department here in the city. So thank you for all the work that you do and for continuing that work to this day. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And, I will just add on that I believe I was elected to council just before you started as the finance director. At that time, I believe there was one accountant in the department in addition to the department head who had actually left by that point. So we had one person and one accountant in the finance department. We have added to that staff. Mrs. Gillis is one. Angela, is it Manaman?
Yes.
I always
Very good.
mispronounce her
No, you
name.
got it.
You know, again, I've seen a significant improvement. I remember seeing capital improvement project lists that were pasted together, sort of Excel spreadsheets, but mostly not, just kind of grid things that they were frightening anyway. But things don't look that way anymore. And again, the implementation of software that allows for the public to view these things, I think, has been a terrific addition. We talked yesterday, I'd still like to see that chart of accounts out there to,
It's there now.
oh, well, see, there you go.
It is.
How efficient can you get? But again, congratulations to you and your staff for all the work that you're doing out there. As was mentioned, the COVID-19 has complicated all of our lives, and your department has done well being on their feet. I also want to congratulate you too in working with the finance directors from other communities during this time too, so that we get a sense of everybody being on the same page with this. So again, thank you and congratulations on the award.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move to item number 5 now. Bill number 1884, the Mounted Police Unit. This is an item that I had requested to be put on. I wanted to see if Holly can get a close-up of this shot here. That's me and Odie.
That's as close as I got it.
Odie was saying hi to me at the electric light parade this past Christmas. Okay, now one of these is a face that everyone can love, and it's not mine, it's the one with the bridle on. So, but this is an example of what this unit does during the year, but that's not really the importance of it. It certainly is a way that unit, I think, brings a lot of pride, a lot of enjoyment to our city residents. But there are other things that I noted in the packet as far as we are an unusual city here with over 200 square miles. Most of that is open desert land. Much of that is difficult to access by vehicle, and horses have their own way of being able to get into areas, bring the officers along for the ride with them, and then let the officers do what they need to do once they get out into those areas. We've had a horse unit here off and on for quite a while, to my recollection anyway. And Sergeant Scott Pastor has been doing this on a voluntary basis, and that's why the wording in this is that the unit is voluntary. It does not cost the taxpayers of Boulder City anything. They go out, they do their own fundraising, they take care of the horses, and they actually provide training for other units in Clark County here. They're well respected, and I believe that this is a function that's important to our city. I know there have been comments added in here from the city manager and the police chief. I can recall just a few months ago when we were doing a survey of the desert area that both the city manager and chief of police were singing the praises of this unit. Now all of a sudden we seem to have some issues about that. One of the things I did want to address, though, was the memorandum that the city manager had included. When this bill was first brought up for introduction, the city manager had recused himself, stating there was some conflict. I don't recall that the basis for that conflict was ever stated. And then a few days later, a memorandum was issued or included in the packet with his concerns about this and how we might actually be interfering with the government structure of Boulder City. So I believe the statement from the city manager was the city manager operates the city through its departments and delegates authority to each department on how to provide the services entrusted to them. This includes department heads organizing their department's functions based on their expertise and community needs. And I want to kind of clear some things up in regard to that. You know, within our city charter, the powers section says that all powers of the city and the determination of all matters of policy shall be vested in the city council. By way of illustration and not by way of limitation, the council shall have the power to, and section 2 of that is, establish other administrative departments and distribute the work of divisions. Additionally, the city charter states in section 28, the city manager shall be the chief executive officer and the head of administrative branch of the city government. He shall be responsible to the council for the proper administration of all affairs of the city, and to that end, subject to the civil service provisions of this charter, he shall have the power and shall be required to, and then go on to others. I think it's important when we get into something where there's some disagreement about what the council is allowed to do. It's not so much what we're allowed to do, it's what the city charter says we are supposed to do. And in this case, we establish policy and we distribute the work among the divisions of the city, of the different departments of the city. I don't understand really why this became such an issue. It's fairly straightforward, fairly simple. This unit has been complimented on multiple occasions. My intent with this is simply to say, we feel as a policy of the city that we would like to have a voluntary mounted unit continue forward. I don't understand why that becomes a controversy. I don't understand why there's a question about a unit that's been in existence for some time suddenly is becoming a burden. It's a voluntary unit. The people who do the work are doing it on their own time. And as I said in some of the reasons that I put forth, I've yet to see anybody complain about this to me. I know that. I know that I've heard many citizens compliment it. I know I've heard of the work that this unit does. I think it's absolutely something that we can put into our city code and strive to achieve. I understand we may not always be able to do that, but I see no problem whatsoever with making this one of the duties of the police department. And with that, I'll open it up. Other questions or comments from council members? Councilmember Hoskins?
Yes, I have a question. I guess I'd have to ask Chief Che, since I don't have the history on this. Within the past year, has this unit ever been suspended?
They, I mean, suspended?
Or done away with, or?
Well, they were stood down while I was answering some questions and concerns on some liabilities, but they weren't done away with. They were just stood down. Part of the stand down was forced on us by COVID because the posse, the volunteers, the people in the light blue shirts that go to all the special events, there were no special events they could go to. So they don't ride with the police officers when they do law enforcement work. So those are the guys all in blue, like Scott and Guy Ledkey, and now we have a reserve. So they go to all the benevolent, parades and events. So the light blue shirts, dark blue pants, and they're the posse, which is under their own nonprofit. And then we have the police department's officers who are part of our mounted unit, who are part of the police department. Mm-hmm. But every year we go through reviews on all of our policies and procedures, and I send things to Polpack to see if anything has changed in areas that are rather volatile. And these kind of units can be rather volatile because just of the nature of the animal and how big it is, and they're flight animals, and if they get they think everything in the world's going to eat them. And if something scares them, their first instinct is to run. So I do that every year. I've done that for long before I came here, and checked with all of our, I had very volatile units, so I checked to see if there's any changes. So that's what we were doing, is looking at liabilities, and we were working with PolPac and updating SOPs and making sure everything was in place. We were doing everything right to make sure we were covering all of the areas that needed to be covered in our training scenarios, our training plans for the training that was going on. So that's pretty much what was going on. But this was, since we really couldn't do any special events because of COVID, it was a good time to do it.
So has it been reinstated?
Yes. Yes, all the questions have been answered. PolPac has gone through everything. We got a pretty nice glowing report from them, to the point where I guess I can brag a little bit. They're so impressed with the program and the training, and Post is going to make it a post course for the state, and PolPac is asked to co-train as one of the trainers for liability and leadership. So they've done, I wish I could say, Scott and those folks have done a great job, and to make sure they cross all the T's and dot all the I's. But it's always a good thing to make sure when you rest on your laurels is when bad things happen, and we don't want to find out after something happens that we had a mistake. So, other agencies had to shut their units down and brought them back. Reno just brought theirs back. Chief Soda was able to reinstate things on the same model we're using. So it's not unusual for things to have to hold off a little bit. Sometimes I was in a SWAT unit. We had to stand the unit down for 6 months while we went through a complete revamp and had our insurance providers look at how we were doing business and change some of our policies and procedures. It's pretty common.
And are all officers required to know how to ride a horse?
Yes, it's quite a process.
Excuse me, I mean all of the officers, not all of the officers in that unit, but every officer
In the police department?
in the whole entire police department.
Oh, no.
Okay, that was what I was getting at.
No.
So it's a specialized,
Absolutely.
same as the K-9 unit, and not everyone has to have the responsibility of knowing how to handle the K-9 unit. Correct?
Yeah, they would not be permitted. They also can't get on a motorcycle. I can't get on a bicycle, police bicycle, because I haven't gone through the bicycle course.
Okay.
So every time you have a unit like that, the people have to be selected for it. They have to be, they go through a selection process. They then have to pass initial training and ongoing qualifications. If anything lapses during that period, we have to either bring them up to speed or say, thank you very much, but it's time for you to move on in that specialty unit. And that's also very common.
Thank you. One other thing I was wanting to tell you that with the assisted living people, they've enjoyed that so much when you went down there. I just heard, I've done a lot of work with them, and they've just gone on and on and on. And my home was on the AAUW holiday tour, and I had about 300 people who came. And most of those people were just so excited about having been to the animal shelter and had their animals blessed or seen the horses and everything. So I want to thank you and the police department for that. I think it's a wonderful thing. I certainly love horses, and I love all animals. So I would hope that we would pass this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Councilmember Bridges?
First of all, I want to ask about liability. If this becomes codified, is that change our level of liability and responsibility in terms of having to have this be part of the responsibilities of the police department, and in terms of staffing and training and availability?
That was my concern. I think that I tried to express. I'm worried about something, not worried. I'm concerned, of course, I always want to meet requirements and standards. I want to meet the expectations that are on us. And if it's a basic duty, and if everything doesn't line up right, all the different things that we can't control, and we can't meet that basic duty, is that become a problem for us? Is that something that is understandable? And I don't know how to word that. It's kind of a balancing thing, because I so appreciate support for these folks and what they do. I can't take zero credit. They do all the work. They're the ones that spend time on this every single day. Every day they have to do something, so I'm pretty proud of them and what they've accomplished. But I'm concerned about something being in the code that says you must do this function when I can't control, or my people that follow me can't control if there's somebody, number one, willing to do it, number two, has an animal that can qualify, and number three, they both can pass the very difficult training that you have to go through. And that was my concern, that I didn't want to fail at meeting expectation. I didn't want to set up the people that came behind me with a possible failure. I sure there's ways to mitigate that, but that's where I was coming from on this. I think they're very valuable. I think I was won over by these units 15 years ago, and I understand what they can do and can't do, and they've done a great job for us here. So.
Who pays for the training for the riders and the horses and I'm assuming the owners of the horses pay for the maintenance of the horses, but in terms of the training you were talking about, necessary training.
We do the training in-house, so the training's done here. Scott is recognized as a trainer. I send him to the training in California. I gave him training days to go there because I wanted him to come back and make absolute sure that we were doing things properly. I didn't want to have our folks out and have somebody hurt at one of our events and not have made sure that we did the proper training. There is a law in Nevada under the NRS, under Title 41, that gives us immunity for a lot of things when it comes to horses if we do the right things. So I wanted to make sure we did the right things. I wanted to be absolutely at the top. Spent time with Metro, had their trainer come out. We went to their training classes, spent 80 hours of training with them. They came back and said, yeah, everything's great and wonderful. So the city paid for Scott's salary when he went to the training. There was no cost to go to it. It was in California Mounted Unit. I think it was in Riverside County when they did it. So, and now Scott's become the trainer for the course that Post is adopting for the state.
Okay, one question more. Okay, are they currently used to enforce or chase down or enforce the law out in the desert? Are they currently used as a law enforcement vehicle? As opposed to, I'm thinking about the people who disobey the rules on their ATVs. Are the horse units currently used for that, or are they more for show?
Well, they have two functions. They're always doing a law enforcement function when the police officers are there. Whenever they're out, it's just not just for show. They're doing a law enforcement function. When they're here at a special event, they're doing crowd, they're watching people. They just have a nice vantage point. When they're out in the outlying areas, what I had them doing out there was mostly surveying. We were trying to get a handle on where we have homeless people at. And I was concerned, especially as the temperatures went up, on where they were staying and where they were living, because we don't really know where they all are. And I couldn't get officers up into there. So the idea was we pied out areas of the city, and we're sending them out doing these searches to see if they could find people living out there and finding out what's out there. Now, if they went out there and found a violation of law like meth use or something, they're police officers first. But they're not going to chase down an ATV or something like that. That's not good. Now, if somebody rode up to them and they would, do the same education that our ATV people do, where you can ride, where you can't ride, and things like that. But they're police officers first. We just changed their vehicle.
Thank you.
Councilmember Adams?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess to kind of follow up on with Councilmember Hoskins' question, so there hasn't been then any discussions or considerations to remove or otherwise disband the mounted horse unit in its entirety?
To my knowledge, no. I was called by Commander Spire, and he said, hey, we're doing a stand down, and the city manager wants to meet with you about liabilities when you get back. I was out of state. And it just took me a while to do all the things I wanted to do because I didn't want to bring a half-finished project. I wanted to make sure I went over everything. So I sent everything up. I got a hold of my contact at PullPack. I sent everything up there. Wanted to know if anything had changed, if we were out of compliance anywhere. And this, takes a little bit of time. And I was ready to sit down and start doing the presentation about 2 weeks ago, roughly. And Scott, I had him update me on all the updated training things that were out, all the updated curriculums, because I wanted to see where we were and where they were at. And it just took a little bit of time to get all that put together. And again, because we were kind of in COVID has us kind of restricted anyway. I really wasn't in a big fat hurry. Now, if we knew that, for example, there was a big event like Art in the Park coming up, I would have rushed. But because there wasn't, I just really wasn't I didn't want to rush a job and I didn't want to do half a job. I wanted to have everything lined out and have the ability to answer every single question and concern.
Understood. So Title II, Chapter 5, Section 3, Part E itself, I know I talked to you about this during the briefing, but it says to recruit and train volunteer police officers to act as auxiliaries to the regularly appointed police personnel as may be approved by the city manager. How does that really differ in one instance where we're asking for volunteers? So obviously that's not necessarily can be always called upon. How does that differ from having a separate volunteer unit?
Well, that terminology is really, really pretty old. The reserve police officers used to be called auxiliaries, and it's probably they probably adopted it from the military. When I arrived here, we had auxiliaries, but they were not commissioned reserves. They were our volunteers. It had morphed into this group. So I did away with the auxiliaries. I made them all volunteers like is common out west. And our reserve police officers aren't auxiliaries. They might function as the old term auxiliaries, but we still do have reserve police officers. In fact, you'll see two of them at the next council meeting. So they're volunteers. They're fully commissioned under post with restrictions on what they can do. They cannot supplant, and they must be with regular officers when they're out doing their jobs. And those are what reserves are. And we do have 3 of those now. But so we're still doing that. It's just the terminology is a little confusing. But so we have 2 groups of people on horses. One group are all in blue. Those are police officers. They're post-certified. Some are regulars. They're getting paid. They're city employees. The other ones are reserve. He doesn't get paid. The other folks are what's called posses, and they're common all around the country. They do competitions, they do parades, they do all sorts of things. They're almost, if you liken them to our explorers, they're affiliated with the police, but they're not really a part of the police officer. They're their own 501c, I think, for getting donations. We control them. We monitor what they can do and what they can't do. They can't go out by themselves. They have to be with the police officer. And that's what they would be. So, and I don't remember. Most of them belong to the Horsemen's Association, but some don't. One of them comes up from Arizona. She's part of the Mojave County. She's a reserve in Mojave County, but she got kind of impressed and came up here. And we have a couple other folks that are actually police officers in other places who ride with our posse.
So did you say then you find it problematic then even Part E in that thing, having language that calls for voluntary force or volunteers to help support the police department?
Well, again, it's problematic because it's getting very, very difficult to find people like that reserves. It's very hard. It's very hard to get them trained, and it's very hard. The reserves that you'll see next month, it's taken them a year to become reserves. And one of them was a posse member, and the other one just wants to do this really bad. It's very, very difficult to take all the classes and the courses and what you have to do to become certified. It used to be that reserves would outnumber the regulars in many departments. You would go there, you'd find 60 regulars and 120 reserves. Now it's very, very difficult. Many police officers, when I started, went from reserve to regular. You started as a reserve. Many of our guys here were reserves here at one time. They didn't get paid. And then a job opened up and they went. Not anymore. If anybody wants to become a police officer, there are jobs begging. So I think it's problematic language because it may not be something that we can meet in the future. So for a while we had no reserves. We had none. I just was able to add one about a year and a half ago. It's been the first one in years that the city's had.
And did any issues present themselves because of the lack of being able to do that, or was it just more of a sense of uncomfortableness of not being able to comply with, say, that section?
Yeah, it's a personal thing with me. I like to meet expectations, and I want to make sure that we do what we're supposed to do. And I'm always concerned when we have something that's statutory that we cannot accomplish. And it's one of those things that, I hate to use the word professional, but it makes you look like, oh, here's something in the code, but yeah, we can't do that. And I'm always concerned about that. I'm a guy who likes, here's what the law says and here's what we do, folks. And that, again, that's where my concern lies. And I did have a rewrite for that section for the code update that took some of that old language out and made it more in line with what are our duties, what do the police really do? Not how we're constructed, but what we're tasked to accomplish.
Thank you. Yeah, I know. I appreciate it. Obviously the difficulty here for me is, I do support this unit. I think the community, we have a great deal of support for it. Yep. But I do obviously share some of the concerns that you yourself have expressed. I understand. So I'm kind of, but I also want to know that, the next guy who comes in to fill your seat, maybe he's not a horse guy or whatever it is, but I want to make sure that they also know that it is a priority of the city, that it is something that we would like to see if possible. So, it's this balancing act of, not wanting to create unreachable goals and having that codified, but at the same time wanting to have in place a policy that says this is a priority to us, or it is of something that is of enough importance to the city that we as a city council want to say we want to make sure that when it's available, when we have the units available, that this is there for us. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
It's quite a balancing act, I understand. And one of the things that I did when I first came here, I told the city manager at the time and all the folks at the police department that my goal was to get you back where you were before the economic downturn. And I wanted to look at everything they had in the past, and was it something that we should resurrect and bring back? Or is it something that needed to go away and stay gone? Government gets that way. You get something and next thing you know, it's been here for 20 years and nobody even knows why it was originally done. So everything that we put back into place that needed to come back into place, the dogs came back, the motorcycles came back, the mounted unit came back. We did very measured, and because we saw a need and we saw something that could be accomplished. I said, I'm from back east, and when you think of the West, what do you think of? You expect to see some of these things. And I think I told everybody the story in Seattle where we had a very negative demonstration going on in one of our poorer areas, and some of the mounted guys were there, and people were screaming and yelling and throwing stuff. And there was a lady who was pretty vocal and pretty profane, and as she's walking away, she has a little girl with her, and she stops and shakes her head a couple times and frowns and walks back and says, "Can my little girl pet the horse's nose?" And the officer got down and said, "Absolutely." And next thing you know, we have a crowd around. The officers are off the horses. We're all sitting there talking, playing with the horses. And it was a great deal, and that's where I was won over. And they have great value. They can be misused like any other police tool, and we don't misuse them. So like I say, I'm very proud of the folks and what they do and their dedication and how they do things. And I think they've done a wonderful job, personally. And I say, I don't ride them. As a little kid, my mother tried to have me do horseback riding lessons. I fell off a lot, so I don't do it anymore. I don't ride the motorcycles. I don't do any of that. But I understand what you're saying, and it's kind of a balancing act. But that's my concern, is that I don't want to get painted into a corner and not meet expectations, nor do I want to set somebody up coming behind me for failure. And that's really my deal.
Thank you for comments.
Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Fulton?
Thank you, Mayor. So this memo that was added to this document by the city manager was kind of confusing for me, because previously, on the last time when this bill was introduced, the city manager recused himself and had someone step in for this item. And then it goes on to say that was no communication with the department previous to this being brought forward. City manager, have you requested that city council that you would be present when we speak with staff?
I'm sorry, could you ask that question again?
Yes, city manager, in the past, you have requested that you be present when the city council speaks with staff. Is that true?
Yes, generally that is correct.
Okay. So when you had recused yourself from this item, council could not talk to staff about this item to staff?
Actually, when I recused myself, that was at the council meeting at the time, and as I explained to you in council briefs, at that time, under advice from my personal attorney, I did so. Since then, after reviewing information, I now feel that I can, in fact, make a comment, and so I did so through that. Okay. Now, in your question, though, I do want to clarify that the council has always contacted directors directly and in most instances CC'd me on emails to let me know that there's communication going on. I will ask the chief to verify, both the chief and I were completely 100% blindsided by this agenda item when it appeared. I also want to say, since you asked that question, it leads right into the response to that question. Is the reason it was blindsided is because, as a matter of day-to-day operations, the city manager is the CEO and the administrative head.
Right, and I understand that, and you have reiterated that to us many times, city manager. I just wanted to establish that it would be very hard to speak to staff. For this council, for me personally, you recused yourself from this item. So from the time that the bill was heard and the time that this memo appeared, because I did not see this memo personally until the packet was presented to the public last Thursday afternoon. So it kind of puts a wedge in communication on this item, is what I'm trying to get to. And obviously we see stuff for the first time when it comes on the packet as well. And so that's just what I'm getting to, that it's difficult to have communication when it gets cut off. A liability concern was brought up. I have a bigger concern with liability when we're doing something and it's not on the books anywhere. This is a program that's been established for quite some time. It's even addressed on the Boulder City page for the police department as part of our units. So for me, it's different when we're having something that's not on the books otherwise, and yet we're doing it. There's large areas in this community that people can't get to besides on horse. We have a huge valley to monitor and patrol, and those animals get us there. Those are the volunteers. And as far as the getting stuck on the vocabulary of being mandated, voluntary means when you have a volunteer. It doesn't mean it's always. Codes have language that is shall and that is may, and voluntary to me means when you have a volunteer. That's not mandated. We, absent any other guiding document which says what our police department is doing, this is the best option that we have right now. I've asked that if there's any other policy procedures that we're following, best practices is one of them, which is great. But unless we have another guiding document, this is the only way for our council to establish this at this time. And I understand that there's things in the code that they feel need to be changed, but until there are changes made, this is the best way, I think, to have it established and part of our community, which is already here. So I don't understand why this is becoming such an issue. This is something we're already doing. We're just putting it on the books. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right. Again, I don't understand, how this became controversial. I think, as Councilmember Adams pointed out, there is similar language already in the code with regard to reserve and auxiliary officers being voluntary. And with that, I will make a motion to approve bill number 1884.
Second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
4-1 with Councilmember Bridges dissenting. Thank you. We'll now move to item number 6, a presentation from Community Development, and we have the Community Development Director, Michael Mays.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm pleased to present the annual Community Development Report to the Council this evening. The Community Development Department has 5 primary responsibilities for the city. It includes building permits and inspections, planning and zoning responsibilities, economic development, code enforcement, and historic preservation. And I just want to take a moment to publicly acknowledge the Community Development Department staff. The last 6 months have been challenging for everyone. They have been working very hard and diligently to be able to respond to our customers, the citizens and businesses of the community. That has required being adaptive and resourceful and looking for ways to continue to provide customer service. And so I very much appreciate and acknowledge their hard work over the last 6 months. I want to start with building permits and inspections. So one of those challenges was with COVID-19, and to protect our citizens and to protect our employees, closing City Hall for those type of interactions. Well, the challenge was that we had a lot of our plans and permits being submitted physically, paper copies that created a challenge in how we would continue to operate and provide the plan review services that the citizens expect. And we were able to successfully adapt to an electronic format. In fact, about 95% of all of our applications today and the plans are submitted electronically. It not only helps to protect employees and citizens regarding the situation with COVID-19, but it's also improved the plan review process because we're able to process those plans much more quickly in an electronic format. Another accomplishment over the last 6 months that you're all very familiar with is the adoption of the building codes. That took a lot of work with our staff, and now we're in sync with the other jurisdictions with respect to those codes to help serve our citizens and provide the guidance necessary within those building codes. I want to show you a graph here that highlights the number of building permits issued each calendar year. You will see that with the calendar year 2018, it is significantly higher than other years. We usually see on an annual basis between 500 and 600 building permits each year. 2018 was an anomaly. There was a couple of projects coupled with solar that triggered more individual building permits, but we can say with confidence that the trend will continue to be between 500 and 600 per year. And you'll note that even during the years of the recession, we had a consistent number of building permits. People doing remodeling, adding fences, other projects, even during downturns, that has maintained that consistency throughout the last 10 years. You also see with building inspections, several years that had a significant increase in those inspections. Those are primarily because of solar projects. Each solar project has numerous inspections. This is the reason why we have dedicated inspectors that the solar company pays for that are out on the site all day long because they are moving from literally one inspection to another, and that takes up a full day's work. And so with 2019, you can see almost 17,000 inspections were conducted. And of course, there's all the work not only in doing the inspections, but then processing those, which is important. And another reflection with 2019 is we also saw with Boulder Hill Estates, subdivision moving forward and the inspections there, but predominantly solar work is the result of those inspections. One of the things that we use as a measure of performance is looking at the average time it takes for a building permit application that is submitted for the initial review, reviewed by the city, which is a multi-department process, and then the response back to the customer occurs. You can see with this graph for fiscal year 20, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, it shows the average number of days that it took between that initial submission and when we got the response back to the customer. We typically target between 2 weeks or sometimes 3 weeks, depending on the workload for that initial response. That initial response has the greatest amount of review on the part of city staff. And certainly it's not only community development, but public works, utilities, and fire department that is reviewing these plans and providing comments. And so we appreciate the coordination between the departments to be able to provide that timely response. Back in 2018, our building inspector retired. It was a full-time position. And as we've done with other positions, we evaluated that position to determine whether it was more cost-effective and efficient to, instead of hiring a full-time employee, going to a third party to have that work done. And based on our projections and estimates at the time, and what we presented to the council was that it would be more cost-effective to go to third party. And so I just wanted to share with you the analysis. It would have cost approximately $120,000 to hire a full-time building inspector at that point. In fiscal year 20, we spent $84,000, so that was a $36,000 savings. The advantage to using third party is that as the level of inspections and construction fluctuates, then the use of that consultant can vary as needed. And so wanted to share that analysis with the council this evening. The next division, planning and development, the city planner has a lot on her plate, Susan Daniel Levitch, between doing the zoning compliance with all building permits that come in, to processing applications that go before the Planning Commission, whether it's variances, rezoning requests, text amendments, and of course with review of the master plan and any proposed amendments. Another responsibility, and as has been presented to the council in the last 6 months, is the department's role and her individual responsibility in processing community development block grants. And as we've shown with the next 5-year budget, those are going to go predominantly to the lend-a-hand remodel of ABC Park Building 3 and to support improvements to the senior center. One of the strategic planning goals in the 2020 strategic plan is to show compliance with the city's controlled growth ordinance. And just as I did last year, I wanted to give you an update on where we're at with respect to our compliance with the controlled growth ordinance. you'll see on the screen 3 colors. Green represents the maximum number of allotments that the city can issue. These are building permits for single-family homes, apartments, a condo, residential units. These would also include mobile homes. So the maximum each year is 120. So you see that green line shows 120 for each construction year. Construction year is defined as starting on July 1 and ending on the following June 30th. You will see with the blue in each of those corresponding years the number of allotments that were allocated by the City Council for various developments. So it clearly shows that we have been well below the maximum number of building permits or allotments that could be issued. The other thing I wanted to emphasize with this graph is just because the council provides an allotment to a development, it doesn't mean it's necessarily built. In our code, if the allotment allocation is not used within a year of when it is approved, it goes away. And so that developer would have to come back to the city council and ask for that allotment again. And there's also the opportunity for reservations. These are for future construction years, and as you can see on the graph, there is 30 for construction year 2021, and this is for the Boulder Hills Estates subdivision. Now I want to move to economic development. Obviously, with COVID-19, this has been a priority for the department. I'm also going to be sharing some economic information, and I want to emphasize that some of this data, because economic data lags with what's occurring in real time, is dated, but it's still an indication not only of our concerns with COVID-19 moving forward, but the general concerns the community's had since the opening of I-11 and its impact on the community. So one of the things that, I wanted to also emphasize with respect to economic development efforts is we're moving forward with implementation of the economic development plan action items that were adopted by the City Council. Rafi Festechkin, our economic development coordinator, that's one of his primary responsibilities. And again, having measurable, actionable goals helps to guide our staff in implementing the policies of the community. One of those action items is the publishing of a business resource guide. And this was accomplished within the last 6 months. In fact, it's something that was highlighted in a workshop that we held with entrepreneurs in partnership with the Chamber to help promote business growth within the community. Rafi is also within fiscal year 20 helped over 177 businesses to help guide them with their permits and applications and information, general information about how to do business in the community. So one of the measures that we've been looking at, we started measuring the office retail vacancy rate within the community. This began in July of 2018, and so we canvassed all of the office and retail buildings within the community, identified which properties were vacant, and then measured that vacancy rate. This is always an indication of the health of the local economy with how many empty buildings, empty spaces there are within the community. And as you can see, with our third collection of this data of July 2020, we have seen a continued decline in the vacancy rate within the community. So back in 2018, it was 6.5%, and it was down to 4% vacancies within the community, which compares well with the Las Vegas Valley. Obviously, as we continue to move forward and evaluate the impacts of COVID-19, this is going to be another measure of the impact of COVID-19 on the community. One of our other goals was to increase business community participation in our RDA grant program. This is the city's opportunity to help reinvest in commercial properties within the city. And one of the things that we had identified is that in years 2017 and 2018, no grants were approved for businesses within the community. And so a combination of streamlining the grant application process and a lot of work on Rafi's part to work with businesses to help them first understand the opportunity of the grant program, and then to help them with the application process. You've seen the results here with an increase with the last fiscal year 20, $64,000 that was approved by the RDA and City Council. I mentioned before about the caveat with respect to the data that I'm sharing, economic impact data, in relationship to COVID-19. So we continue to receive data from VisaView that looks at tourism spending habits within the community. This data represents the first quarter of 2020. And of course, the first quarter ended at the end of March, and the state of emergency began at the end of March. So what this shows you is that already in the first quarter of 2020, there was some impact from COVID. We believe it was foreign tourists, and you can see there was a 40% reduction in visitation, not coming to the Vegas area and not coming to our local businesses. Some of the other information showing positive or neutral impacts with restaurants, retail, and supermarkets, and a continued negative impact on travel, entertainment, quick service restaurants is what we had seen before. And again, this is before COVID, but what we had seen before with the opening of I-11. Another data point to share, and again, prefacing that this is before COVID-19, but still, I think, good information as it relates to the economic impacts of I-11 is with respect to NDOT's traffic counts. Once a year, they measure the number of vehicles, average daily trips that occur at certain points throughout the community. And so I put together this graph that kind of shows, this chart that shows the comparison between the number of average daily traffic in 2017 to 2019 and the percentage change. NDOT had predicted with the opening of I-11 that we would see probably 2/3 of the traffic along Boulder City Parkway. And as you can see from the chart, that is accurate at 65% to 61%. But what's interesting is that some of the other points within the community, we've actually seen an increase in traffic. At the Lake Mead entrance, 110% over that time period, and Boulder City Parkway down Lakeside near Lake Mountain Drive, a slight increase. Also, with Nevada Way, along majority of where our businesses are in the downtown area, their drop was only a 19% drop over that time period. So I want to move on to code enforcement. Some of the data for code enforcement, we saw a 12% increase in code enforcement cases for fiscal year 20 over 19, 120% increase in online complaints, and of that, online complaints were 48% of the total complaints. And so we see this as a reflection of moving to see, click, fix, making it easier for our citizens to be able to let us know when they see property maintenance concerns within the community. that is helping with that increase so that the city can respond. Another performance measure that we want to share is the percentage of closed cases on a fiscal year basis. In fiscal year 19, code enforcement was able to close 87% of the cases that had been opened during that fiscal year. In fiscal year 20, it was 82%. So continuing to maintain a high closed case rate, even though we're seeing an increase in cases. Now moving on to historic preservation. Before I'd mentioned about how the economic development plan and the action items contained therein have been very helpful in guiding our department with successful implementation of the city's policies. The same holds true with the historic preservation goals that were prepared and adopted by the Historic Preservation Committee and then presented to the City Council last September. And so that's what we're using as our roadmap to move forward to help implement the community's goals as it relates to historic preservation. The designation of Boulder City as a certified local government has been very beneficial to the community. It provides us access to resources. It provides us access to grant funding opportunities to help with the implementation of the Historic Preservation Committee goals. One of the beneficiaries of that, and what will be presented tomorrow night before the Historic Preservation Committee, is the grant that is paying for the Northwind survey of the historic district. This is an evaluation and update of the 1983 Janus report, looking at each of the properties within the city's historic district and looking at conditions and whether they contribute or don't contribute to that district. So that presentation will be tomorrow night before the committee. Another thing that has been impacted by COVID-19 was our efforts to move forward with the Historic Preservation Plan. Nevada Preservation Foundation was hired to help the community move forward with a plan for historic preservation action items. There was an initial meeting that occurred in March. Because of COVID, that's been put on hold. But one of the things we're going to be talking to the committee about tomorrow night is how we can move forward with the Nevada Preservation Foundation to be able to engage the community to move that plan forward. Another grant opportunity will be with this fiscal year in calendar year 21 regarding the National Alliance for Preservation Commissions, be able to bring them to the community to help provide education for the committee as well as for the citizens within Boulder City. And with that, I will take questions.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Councilmember Adams?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for the very in-depth and detailed report. Certainly when I was originally going through the PowerPoint, minus the context, I about fell out the back of my chair when I saw that it said that there was positive impact for some businesses, but obviously with the context that this is all information leading up to the shutdown and everything, it certainly makes more sense, and I think it's important that people understand it. And I think it is very telling that we were already seeing the visitations down, that we were already seeing the impacts even that early on. I know myself personally, knowing a lot of people who work on the Strip or working in the entertainment, we were all seeing people getting their shifts called off already for the months leading up to this whole thing. So I think it's very obvious that this has been a very severe impact on all of us, especially this community who has a huge focus on events and things of that nature. And I do definitely want to thank your department for all of your efforts in reaching out to the business community and making sure that they're aware of the programs that were available, especially in the early months as we were trying to figure this whole thing out. You guys were absolutely going above and beyond to make sure that there were answers for people, or at least, doing your best job to provide it when there weren't a whole lot of answers and just a whole lot of questions. So I do really want to thank you for all the work that you and your department have done in those regards.
Councilmember Bridges?
Yeah, again, I'm amazed at this city. We've got some incredibly hardworking people, and your department is absolutely to be commended. I know I've dealt with Susan with the community development block grants, and I'm amazed she goes home. And all of you, and having seen you at the Southern Nevada Regional Planning Coalition, the two things. First of all, I'm really impressed in the fact that we saved $36,000 on the inspector. Usually we tend to go the opposite way, of saying we spend so much on contractors, we should hire someone. But this is certainly a good decision to go that direction. The percentage of closed cases has reduced. Is that a function of just the sheer quantity of cases?
I think it's a combination of the number of cases and then some of the complexity with the cases. Obviously, one of the things that we work to strive is working with property owners to bring their properties into compliance. Sometimes that isn't successful, and then it takes additional measures, but we're always trying to work with our residents because it's important for everybody understanding their conditions and situations to maintain their property. And we try to look for ways to help with that.
Yeah, I also wanted to comment in terms of economic development. It's just really nice to drive down Nevada Way and not see our historic district in decay, and to see these businesses developing along the way. And whether it's the Boulder City store or the new coffee shop that's going into the broader building. I give you all a lot of credit in terms of moving all those things forward, too. That's great. Thank you. That's it.
Councilmember Hoskins?
Yes, I just wanted to comment. You've mentioned this before, Mr. Mays, on the RDA, that we've spent $64,000. And there's a lot of rumors around that this council is not into the RDA. And yet I look at 2016 was $21,000, 2017 and 2018, nothing, and 2019, $29,000. So I think we can dispel that rumor. I think we've been doing very well. Thank you.
Councilmember Boulder?
Thank you. Mr. Mays, I just had one question as far as, we talked about the differences in the last couple of years between our building inspections. And I'm assuming, those are both for residential and commercial and solar. But what does count as an inspection? Can one person come to a building and inspect not only the structure, but the plumbing or electric, for example, and that's 3 different permits. So is that 3 different inspections, or what? When we get these large jump in numbers, what is counting as an inspection? And especially like with solar, they have individual different solar panels. So is each individual panel also a separate inspection? Could you kind of elaborate on that number and the change in that?
Sure. So it depends on the complexity of the project. But you can have many, many inspections tied to one permit, or you could just have one inspection tied to a permit. Mm-hmm. So for example, a single-family home can have up to 40 inspections. And you're right, some of those can be taken care of at the same time. So when the applicant calls in and say they want a rough plumbing and rough framing, then the inspector goes out and does both of those inspections, but they are counted as separate inspections. And obviously with solar, because of the rapidity of the structures and the solar panel arrays, there are many, many inspections happening within a day. And a permit for solar can have hundreds, if not thousands, of inspections tied to it.
Okay. So when we're talking about the inspections and that huge jump, I mean, that can account for a lot of it because of, individual panels and things like that. Big developments that are happening that need a lot more inspections. They're not a normal average inspection that we would see year to year. It's just kind of a flux because of the development that's happening.
Correct, and specifically solar development. That's where you saw those spikes in those years. Mm-hmm. Those were tied to solar projects.
Okay, and so the contract that we have with our building inspector does fluctuate with that increase of demand, and we can decrease that and the pay as well with that. We have flexibility in that.
Correct, and that's where, and we use CSG Consulting, and not only do they provide our day-to-day inspections within the community, but they also have dedicated inspectors that are down at the solar projects. Because of the size of the community, it's not practical to be able to have inspectors here in the office trying to both do inspections in town and then solar project inspections, because as I mentioned before, they are out there 8 to 10 hours a day just doing inspections. And so that's where we have those agreements with the developers of those solar projects, where they are paying the fees of the dedicated inspector. They pay the fees to the city. The city, through CSG, has inspectors do the inspection work.
Okay, and so is that above and beyond what a normal residential? They wouldn't pay fees that would pay for the inspector?
Correct. They're paying for the dedicated inspector for their
themselves.
project.
Okay. And then probably they appreciate that to get it moving faster. Is that something kind of why they're doing that way?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Nope, I think that was the only one I just wanted to expound on a little bit, just because there was a huge difference in numbers from year to year and explaining why that would be. Nope, this other comment I had was on the historic preservation, and getting public input is always kind of a challenge. There's a lot of meetings that go on in Boulder City and a lot of events, not so much lately, but getting output and then getting the word out is a challenge, especially when we can't meet in person anymore or as much. So I just, if they're, it'd just be nice to see what the consultant and what ideas are out there for the historic preservation tomorrow night to help them to get that outreach, because I think it really does help get an idea of how people are living, what changes and what their views are, and how that can affect or impact Boulder City and the things that we're trying to do with preservation in Boulder City. So hopefully that outreach can still occur and we can move forward. I know this council has all been very excited about moving forward with historic preservation, and so hopefully we can move those items forward, COVID or no COVID. Thank you.
I also had a question on the inspections when I saw them, so I did the math. I believe I did it correctly. Comes out to 46 inspections per day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So I'm assuming the solar accounts for much of that they do
Yes.
that. I've mentioned before that I've heard from residents that the plan process, the submission of plans, the approval of plans, the complaint I've heard is that they'll get the plans rejected for one reason. They'll go back to their architect or engineer. They'll correct whatever it was that was pointed out. They'll bring the plans back, and then there's something else that their plans are being rejected for. So I won't say that's widespread, but it's expensive and it creates an enormous delay in people getting their projects done. I think the submission electronically, not everybody is there obviously yet, but that should be a big help. And I'm glad to see that you're doing it. Certainly around Boulder City for a long time, it was, do you need a permit to do that? Nah, we'll just go ahead and do it. So that may help with that as well, that we'll get better compliance, especially for smaller things, water heater replacement or, roof repairs, things like that. They're a little more routine and people are trying to take care of on their own to try and maybe save some money. So I think that is a benefit of that electronic process. With the zoning updates and master plan updates, I'm not sure, we've seen several of those come through, and I do appreciate the work that you and your department are doing in that regard. For years I saw things go through the Planning Commission where variances were granted. Variances were granted like, the Pope issues blessings to people during the Easter holiday. It was wrong. It was the wrong way to do things. So I appreciate the fact that you are trying to get our zoning improved to where these variances are not being done anymore. Variances require a certain process, and that was absolutely not being followed by the Planning Commission to follow that process. But I am concerned too, as we look at larger changes to our zoning, are we getting input from the community? And, COVID-19 makes that extremely difficult right now to do. But I want to make sure that the community is aware of how these types of changes can impact development here in Boulder City and what we had before and what might be allowed in the future to make sure that the community is in agreement with those changes being made. The CDBG grants, the Community Development Block Grants, those come with a lot of strings attached, both from the federal government and the county government. I appreciate all the work, again, that you and Susan Danielewicz have been doing on that. I'm not sure that we always leverage those grants in the best way in the past, and I think we're seeing now that money being used productively for the senior center for some of their projects. Lend a Hand is going to be starting a project soon. These are entities within Boulder City that give back a tremendous amount of service to this community, and that really is the purpose of these development block grants, is to do that type of work. With economic development, that's almost a red herring to say that in the time of COVID-19 right now. I mean, we're in a time of desperation right now as far as that goes. But the outreach that's been done to businesses, we saw a report last week from State OSHA that their inspections here in Boulder City showed we were 100% compliant. Now, it didn't look like we made that level this week, but I think a great deal of that is owed to what is being done to help the businesses understand what the guidelines are. So I very much compliment what's being done in that regard. I am afraid, though, we have gotten into a place, and this is not something new, this has actually been happening over several years. The Chamber of Commerce seems to be more than happy to criticize this council when we don't contribute the amount of tax money or public property that they feel they're entitled to. I don't think that's a cooperative way to approach this. I know that Councilmember Hoskins made the comment, I believe a couple of months ago now, that she, on her own initiative, had gone out and talked to businesses and found a location where the chamber might be able to relocate to. But clearly, Jill Lagan, the CEO of the chamber, heavily criticized the council for not doing what she wanted us to do by giving her some access to public property. I believe that we do support businesses. I think we've always done that. My concern is when certain people feel that we are responsible for their success. That's not the definition of capitalism I learned when I was in economics class. So I'm disappointed when I hear that type of talk from the chamber, but I know that your department has been doing a great deal of work in trying to do what we can under these circumstances. I think we also need to keep in mind that we've kind of been talked into the only business of Boulder City is tourism. One, tourism has shown over and over again to be a very poor choice to base an economy on. We can look at what's happening in Southern Nevada, just like we could look after the Great Recession, like we could look at the bubble, the dot-com bubble in the 2000s. Somebody started saying before the Great Recession that Vegas was recession-proof. For those of us who've been around a long time, we know that's not true, that Vegas is actually recession-prone. And it's prone because when other people start losing their jobs, they stop coming to Las Vegas. So I would really like to see much more emphasis on other types of business that provide stable employment and far less of the taxpayers always having to do promotion for the tourists. Even though that is a segment of our economy, certainly those are some of the businesses that have been hurt the most right now and need whatever help we can give them. But I think we need to be careful in where we do put our efforts and the fact that we're not responsible for doing all the advertising for the Chamber of Commerce that they would like to have. There are plenty of businesses here, sole proprietorships, family-owned, long-time owners of these businesses that have just been pushed to the limit right now. Those folks we can certainly provide some help for, but I think we need to come to the realization too that what keeps Boulder City running really is not tourism based, and it's not the best decision to make if you're looking to develop a strong economy. So I would like to make sure that we look for other opportunities besides just the adventure tourism that Ms. Lagan always wishes to talk about. I think there are a lot better ways to build an economy than that. With regard to the RDA projects, again, I know that Councilmember Hoskins just mentioned that. When I first came on council, I believe I spoke with you, or when you were hired, I spoke with you about the reputation that the RDA had and why so many of the businesses in town did not want to have anything to do with it. I appreciate the work that you and Rafi, and again, I butcher his last name, so I won't do that again, but streamlining the application process, making business owners aware of what might be available for them. We've seen the old Desert Inn Motel become the Boulder City Inn now. When I go by there, that parking lot certainly has a lot of cars in it now. That was not an attractive property before. It certainly is now. So that's an example of where we can put some money to get some of these projects done. I certainly wish the folks well that are working on the Browder building. That would be fantastic to see that return to a productive property. So I think we're doing well on that front. And I think we need to look again, one of the things that this council has already done is to increase the matching for properties in the historic district, excuse me, from 30% to 50%. So that may be another way to get some of our older businesses some help that they might need as our economy starts to recover. With that, any other questions or comments? Councilmember Adams?
Yeah, I did have just one with regards to our COVID-19 response and your department's role in that. When it comes to the enforcement and reporting of businesses who might not be complying with the governor's directives, what is your department's role in that? Is that part of code enforcement? Is that what of your department is responsible for that? And where does your responsibility end and where does the police department's begin, I guess is my question.
Well, it is a team effort, a team effort that's led by the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center, which has representation from multiple departments within the organization. It's a close partnership between the police department, code enforcement, and our economic development coordinator, providing education and understanding, but then also following through with complaints. Our police chief has spent many, many hours, as well as his officers, with that follow-up, and now we have an obligation to the county to report out weekly on enforcement and proactive activities to help bring everyone into compliance. And so it is very much a multi-department effort.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure, because there is a lot of discussion going on in the community right now as, businesses really try to grasp and grapple with what they are having to deal with. So I just wanted to make sure that there was at least some information put out there so people could at least understand how it is that we are responding, why it is that we're responding the way that we are, just because it is important for the public to have that knowledge. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Mays, thank you. And again, I appreciate all the work. Very difficult times, and your folks are helping to make it a little easier on people. Thank you very much.
Mayor, I very much thank you and the council for your comments this evening. Obviously, as you heard from the police department as well as from finance, we're not going to rest on our laurels. You had talked about the building permit process earlier in your comments, and we've already implemented a new initiative to help address and minimize the lengthy responses that are occurring to help streamline that process. And certainly, as you all know, I serve on the chamber board representing the city, and it's important that we continue our good relationship with our business community because of the challenges we're all going to be facing. And when our businesses do well, so does the community. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. That will bring us to item number 7, discussion of a change in employment description. Mr. Bolt.
Evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Bryce Bolt, your Administrative Services Director. You do have before you this evening a proposed title change and request to continue funding for the Executive Secretary, and the title change would be an Executive Administrative Assistant. The incumbent is retiring October 1st, and when the position becomes vacant, we always encourage management take a look at that job classification, make sure it still accurately reflects what that job duties and responsibilities are. That review resulted in the proposed title change and classification specification changes. The position is critical to the efficient running of the city manager's office. This position provides administrative support to many of us in the city. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Councilmember Hoskins?
Yes. Comment and question, okay. I'd like to comment that currently the employee in that position has been there for several years, and she is friendly, knowledgeable, and professional, and certainly one of the best employees the city has ever had. So I'd like to acknowledge that. And then if you have a copy of the Executive Administration Assistant position that you sent out, I'd like to point out some things, ask some questions, and see if you can help me out.
Yes, ma'am.
On the physical requirements and working conditions, which is page 2, if everyone wants to look at that. About the middle of the paragraph, where it says the worker is required to have, are you there?
Yes.
Close visual acuity to perform an activity such as preparing and analyzing data and figures, transcribing, viewing a computer terminal. I think terminal shouldn't be in there. That's like an 80s terminology. Okay. And then it gets to be even more confusing, so bear with me here. Expansive reading, visual inspection involving small defects, small and or assembly of fabrication, small parts and or operation of machines, including inspection, using measurement devices, subject to, devices and or assembly of fabrication, which means building something, of parts at distances close to the eye. I don't know if this is a tool and die job or if this is an administrative assistant's position, but I think maybe that needs to all come out.
Yes, ma'am.
I believe that just after computer and maybe even expansive reading, visual inspection, after that, you don't need that visual inspection. Because I don't know what the small parts would be, the machinery would be other than the computer, and the measurement devices that you would be using, or the fabrication of parts and distances. So,
I apologize for that, ma'am.
no problem. I just wanted to point it out because I used to be an executive secretary at one time, and then I was administrative assistant also at one time.
And you never had small parts or machinery?
Well, I mean, I could do that if I were tasked to do it, but I don't think the new person would be interested in doing that.
No.
So other than that, I went through everything, and I think that you pretty much have everything the same as the secretary except for the notary public, and then there are a few other additional items, and I think that this would probably be more apropos for this position.
Thank you.
Councilmember Bridges?
Yeah, I was just curious. I know, or did it say, is there any change in salary for this position, or is this simply a title change?
It's simply a title change.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Foley?
Thank you. Could I just get a little bit of background on how these reclassifications occur? So when we're looking at changing the requirements and working conditions, things like that, or the responsibilities, when we have a current employee, is there consulting with that employee? Or is this just by observation, or how do we get from what it was and to the changes? What's the background on that?
Sure. There certainly is consultation in this particular case, obviously, with the incumbent, and then the familiarity, fortunately, that I had with the job. I used to be housed right next to her. And then also kind of a comparison to other similar classifications, not only internally but externally also. That gets us to the product that we have this evening.
So we reviewed with the current employee, and then observation, and then reviewing, other job titles within city and with, other cities in comparison as well.
Ma'am.
Okay. And then just to elaborate a little bit more, because I did ask the monetary question, can you give the council what the range for this job classification is, and then what the current range is at now?
Sure. The current hourly is $39.34, and the new range, and as a quick explanation on that, in 2012, I believe, there were some pay ranges that were changed by council, and so they became kind of if the incumbents weren't impacted by that change, but new folks coming into those classifications were. So with that said, the incumbent is at, as I said, that hourly, the range of hourly coming in will be beginning at $28.93 up to $38.24.
So just to reinforce that, the range, the highest range wouldn't even be at where it's current now. So there would be some monetary savings if it came at the higher range. Okay, and then this was I'm assuming this had a full package with health and insurance and all that with this position.
Full package.
Thank you.
Councilmember Adams?
Thank you. I guess this follows up a little bit with Councilmember Folda's question. Were these tasks in this newly detailed, were these the tasks that were currently being performed by the incumbent as they are performing their duties?
Yes, we believe they reflect the current duties and responsibilities.
Okay, and then based off of the original classifications from the work that was at least there, and the work that she is doing now, is it enough to say that there is, since we are saying that there's a classification change in title, but there is no compensation difference, so that work duty that even though it kind of had changed a little bit over the year, there was no change in being necessary to compensate differently for that work? Sorry, my words got a little jumbled there, but
Well, that is a tough question. There's internal equity and external equity, and internal equity, I think we're good with this range. Externally, we might have some question about whether we compete with, Henderson and so on and so forth. But internally, I think it's a good number where it needs to be with respect to internal equity, if you will.
And we spoke about this during the briefing, but there is a process if an employee was being directed to do work outside of their scope, that there is a process for them to address that if they feel that they are being asked to do work that they otherwise is not listed in the scope of their original work. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct. There are a couple mechanisms. Management can tell them in writing, I want you to do this task that's outside of your classification, and they would then be working out of class, and they'd be compensated. A variety of equations, depending on what contract you're under, determines that compensation. And an employee can always come to HR and say, I think I'm doing stuff that's outside my classification. And then we'll do an observation, desk audit, and determine whether they are going beyond their current classification. And at that point, management has a decision of whether taking them back into that classification and or considering a reclassification that might involve compensation.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
And just to follow up on Councilmember Adams' question, many of our employees are also union represented.
Yes, sir.
So a grievance process would also be a possibility for an employee. Is that correct?
Yes, it could.
Okay. One, I want to state as well, Nancy Summers is one of the best people I've met here in City Hall, and she'll be missed significantly. With that, I would suggest, I heard a lot of questions, but I believe that Councilmember Hoskins was the only one who had changes that they wanted to make. Councilmember Hoskins, do you want to make a motion based on the changes that you had pointed out?
Yes, I can make that motion. I would move that we change the position from executive secretary to executive administrative assistant with the changes. And I think we could take that sentence and stop it right after the expansive reading. If you agree.
Yes, ma'am, and that would be strike from terminal to...
Well, take terminal out.
Yeah,
and
that's
then
what I
you
meant.
could have expansive reading, but the visual inspection involving small defects, small parts, and or operation of machines, including inspection using measurement devices and or assembly of fabrication of parts at distances close to the eyes, that needs to be removed.
Yes, ma'am.
I will second that. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Mr. Bolt, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And that will bring us to item number 8. Question, this is a question that's going to come up because of our current situation, where as we have openings, the city manager has put a, sometimes we don't like to use the word freeze, but a review process before we fill positions. So, Chief Shea?
I'm back. Unusual for me. Before you, a request that to fill a recently vacated police officer position. So the police department has on its budget the expectation that we leave certain positions vacant. One of them is a police officer position, and that's been vacant since January. And we were in the process of filling it, and we stopped that in March because we could see what was coming. We had an unexpected retirement in July, and so that position is not the position that's expected to be kept open. We have 9 positions that are being kept open right now. Some I'm choosing to keep open to help make budget. They're part-time positions, and it's not hurting us very much. And crossing guards, so we're not using part-time marshals and people like that. But in the police officer ranks, it's critical that we fill our positions as we can in this volatile climate that we're in. We're looking ahead. We do know that there's another retirement coming. I just once again spoke with the officer tonight. He is leaving, and he'll be leaving right around the end of the year. He's been planning this for years, and he has his paperwork all filled out, ready to go. So he'll be going. I believe there's a couple more that are right on the edge, and again, we've hired some people in the 90s, and they're getting to the end of their tenure. You get old and decrepit, and it's kind of time to move on. Pushing a patrol car around on the street gets a little old after a while. And because of the length of time it takes us to be able to process and hire people, we try to get ahead of things. And if we fall behind, we really fall behind. It's a very volatile hiring atmosphere right now. And I did some data checks because from some of the things we talked about yesterday, and I looked to see how many people we were actually getting applying. I told you, numbers when I first started in the business, the 4,000 of us tested, they hired 35 of us. So our last go around, we received 51 applications. Out of that 51, 21 actually showed up to take the physical agility test. Out of that number, they didn't all pass. And we were able to get 12 people into the background process. Out of that process, we ended up with 1. And I don't think it's going to be better this time around. One thing we did do to help us was we were able to reestablish a true lateral entry program. The city really didn't have a true program before. Well, now we do. So we're competing in a very tight market. We're all of us have vacancies. Of course, everybody's dealing with budget issues right now, but there are literally hundreds of vacancies in Southern Nevada right now. And we're all competing for a very small group of people that, one, are willing to do the job. There's a lot of people willing to do it, but can't. And so as you start getting from those willing to those that look like they might be able to those that actually can get out and get through all the processes, that number keeps dwindling. Laterals, you have to be very careful with. You have to make sure that you're hiring people for the right reasons. Usually it's a family relocation or something. You don't want to find somebody who's disgruntled or angry with their department. There's a term out there called rogue cops, and those are people that get into trouble and they'll move to a whole different part of the country to escape discipline or things in other areas. So you got to be very, very careful. And it is a very difficult, volatile hiring atmosphere. We're trying to develop some recruiting tools. I've asked our women officers especially to go out and target some areas, because I think we're underrepresented there, and to help us recruit some new women into the police department. I've asked our younger folks to get with their peers and see about getting them in there. I've asked some of our recent laterals, go back to your old department if things are pretty good here and let them know how good things are. If you know somebody who's really decent and we would like to have them, please send them our way. I don't want people's problem children. But even with them, it's still difficult to hire. And then when it takes us so long. So right now we have a person in field training. He will not be done till the end of October. He tested last September. That's how long it takes us if we go the academy route. So even now filling this position, giving you permission to fill this position, the candidate that we're closest on lives out of state. And because of the state he lives in, he can't get here, because if he goes back to his home state, he has to quarantine for 2 weeks. And his current employer is not too excited about that. So we actually have to work out a way to have the tests, the polygraph, the psychological, done through the police agency in that state. It's just because of the COVID and what's going on now and how difficult it is. So even if we could fill this position, we get permission to do this, we'll be fortunate to be able to fill this position in October. Then the training process begins. We'll have another person leave before this person is operational. And we're going to be I'm going to be standing right back here before you again. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Is we're going to be also putting job announcements out right now. We're trying to start the process to establish eligibility lists. Now the eligibility lists get us to a point where we have people we can start processing and shorten the time down a little bit. That'll knock about 2 months to 3 months off our processing to get them on this eligibility list. That's pre-conditional offer of employment. So we get to a certain point and we hold them right there. And then when we can move to the next level, we take the top candidates that are still available, they get their conditional offer, and then we do all the things that we do after that, the polygraph, the psychological, the medical screening, the drug test, all of those things that come after that. So it's quite a process. Staffing-wise, we can afford one vacancy. Most agencies have a 10% vacancy on any given day. That doesn't mean people on vacation are sick. But one thing that's making things a little difficult for us right now is the uncertainty of the COVID. So we have an officer out right now. His daughter came down with it. So he's out for 10 days. Was recently at a training exercise, Henderson, 13 people out. So we've stopped all that kind of training. There's no more hands-on training and things like this. So for us to have to be missing people in our squads, I could lose a whole squad tomorrow night because of an exposure. So it really helps us to plan ahead and to fill our vacancies as much as the budget can afford to do so. And I think you all know that I try to be very fiscally conservative, and I don't ask for things unless I truly believe that it's something we really do need to do. And otherwise I just buck up, and we do fine. But what's going on right now does compound the issue. So I'm asking that you allow us to move ahead. We'll still have the vacancies that we have. I have no plans to fill any of those right now. But if we do have another person leave, I don't even know right at this point if there's going to even be an academy next year. Every academy class that's started since COVID has started has had to stop because of exposures. So I don't know if it's going to keep going. Nobody knows what's going to be happening over the next few months. I can't count on that. So I'm going to be planning on laterals for the foreseeable future. And I don't believe it's healthy just to hire laterals. It's very important to also have people that go through the academy. And one thing we've been very successful at is our explorers, who many of them have lived here or they grew up here, have been coming back to us. And I think that's a great deal. So the last few officers that have gone to the academy have been our previous explorers. So I'm pretty happy with that too. So if you have any questions for me, I probably said enough.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Councilmember Hoskins?
Yes, I have a comment. I would like to thank the police department. I think you're very professional and dedicated, and I certainly think that we need to fill this position. Thank you.
Councilmember Folda?
Thank you. Chief, I'm not going to let you off the hook for saying old and decrepit. You're not referring to anyone in our department, right?
Just one.
Okay, be careful when you start throwing that around. No, I just wanted to say that I am glad that you acknowledged the issues with lateral, because there are sometimes officers that will try to move to a different department because they're having issues that they've caused. So I'm glad that you acknowledge that we don't want to just be an escape for someone, but that it is a really hard thing to do, to fill a police position. I came from a sheriff's department, and it was kind of the rule. You don't really get to know the rookies, because unless they're there for a year, they have a 6 months training, and most of them don't make it through. And that's just the ones that get through backgrounds. So, but I thank you for acknowledging that there is, that we do want to get the good guys out here and gals, and that it is a revolving door, and without COVID, you probably wouldn't have to explain this. It would just go up on a job application. So I'll let you not stand up here any longer, but I just want to acknowledge, thank you for our police department, all the hard work that they do, covering for each other and just kind of being a family for Boulder City. Thank you.
I wish I could take credit for it, but they do a wonderful job, and they do take care of each other, and I'm pretty proud of them. And I think it's pretty clear what the expectations are and how they're supposed to be interacting with folks. And I think for the most part, that's what you see here 98% of the time. They're humans like everybody else. There are times when they do have all the fallacies and frailties that humans have, and we sometimes have to, grab them by the back of the collar and shake them a little bit. But for the most part, they're really good people. And the thing is, they love this place, and they do really want to be here because they don't have to be. There are other places that would snap them up, many of them right away, but they want to be here, and that speaks pretty highly for the city and the folks and the way they're treated here also.
Councilmember Adams?
Thank you very much. Yeah, again, thank you. I think you explained yourself very well as to why it's important. But I think it's also important that we note that under more cops, there is a certain number of positions that we are required to fill also. So, there's not just the need to make sure that we're properly staffed for our own department's sake, but we do have other obligations outside to ensure that, I believe it's to make sure that we have the same number as those that were employed in 2007, something to that line. So there is other obligations out there as well, but I do absolutely think that it's necessary that we do get the ball rolling on this. So thank you.
Councilmember Bridges?
Well, I'll be for. Absolutely agree that this is necessary, and I really appreciated your explanation of the challenges of a police officer coming down the pike, so to speak, where it starts and even how far you have to look in the future just to fill this one position. And to me, one of the most important things we look forward to here in Boulder City is our public safety. And I'm usually one of those who support those things that make this a really safe place to live.
Well, and I, for one, I put a great deal of time and effort into making sure we do the best we can to hire the right people. It's a 30-year investment, and you hire the wrong people, it can cost the city dearly and the population dearly. So I insist, for example, if we do hire somebody from another agency, we send background investigators to that department, and we talk to that person's supervisor. We talk to the other people who worked with them, and that's from the School of Hard Knocks. There's a very large area of litigation and police work, negligent hiring. It goes along with negligent referral or negligent retention, failure to train, failure to supervise. But you have to be very, very careful. And so far, I think we've done pretty good, and hopefully we continue to do that. It's quite a process, but it has to be done right. And I'm not going to cut corners. It just takes what it takes, the time it takes.
I think it's obvious that Councilmember Adams had referred to the more cops. That's a sales tax that the people here in Clark County voted on themselves. But with that came a requirement that we can't take money from the general fund or can't save money in the general fund and use only that. But I suspect that our department is fairly well sized for our community. We haven't grown very much, so we know how many officers are sufficient, and I agree that we can't be down too often. Clearly, police officers are asked to do many, many things, and getting them trained properly, I'm sure, is a long process, as you've noted. I'll go ahead and make the motion then. I don't believe we need a motion on this. Is that? Okay, staff directive then. I'll make the motion then that we proceed with the hiring of a replacement police officer.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Chief Shea. We'll now move on to item number 9, City Council appointments for the Allotment Committee and the Audit Committee. Madam City Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. The terms of the allotment committee members, there were, is this coming through? Oh, that's better. The terms of the allotment committee members had expired at the end of June. There were 3 terms that expired. And then we also had a vacancy, there was also another vacant position on that committee. We only have 1 volunteer in our folder, and we've been recruiting for a couple weeks. As you know, this came off the last agenda. And our communications manager, we've posted it on social media. We went through old files. We've contacted people. We have 1 volunteer. I do recommend that that the council appoints her. It's supposed to be a draw, but since there's 1, I mean, we don't need to be silly and put one piece of paper in the jar. But that way, if the allotment committee has to have a meeting, we have enough people to have a quorum. Right now, we do not. And then we will continue our efforts to recruit and bring it back again when we can fill all of the vacancies. So.
Thank you, and I agree with that process. This, I believe, is our only committee where we do it by drawing lots.
Yes, and that is that was done by initiative petition when it amended our code about the growth control ordinance. So that is the only committee where we would draw the names out of a bowl, and but we really don't need to do that for
1 for 1 is pretty clear.
Yeah.
And that person is Myrene Aschenbach,
Yes.
and she does, I believe, have some prior experience, as I recall.
She does. She has been a volunteer for the city over the years for a variety of committees and commissions. And so we did contact her. We reached out to her, and she's interested in serving. And just for the public's benefit, if anybody just wants to, get a little introduction on city business, this would be a good committee. They don't meet that often, but it really does deal with, the heart of our community, which is our controlled growth ordinance, and you learn a lot. So, if there's somebody out there that can't be available every month, this might be a good committee to start with. So I just encourage people who might be watching this, there's nothing intimidating about it, and it would be a good committee if you want to serve your community, but you couldn't do it on a monthly basis.
I agree, and the controlled growth ordinance is such a part of this community, is what has made this community, and that's what this committee is about. I suspect when it was first created, they thought that, Boulder City was going to grow like Las Vegas, but it's still a great place to learn more about this, how the community has developed. So I guess, we can do it just by acclamation then?
Yes.
Okay, any objection to doing this by acclamation? All right, then that would make the appointment of Ms. Aschenbach for that committee.
Yes, thank you. And then the next committee is our audit review committee. Marty Reel had served on that committee, but has since been appointed to the utility advisory committee, therefore leaving an unexpired term on the audit review committee ending June 2021, which is when we do all of the appointments after a general city election. So, and of course, we, per our code, you can only serve on 1 permanent board at a time. So, like the ad hoc pool committee, since that will go away when the job is done or in December, unless the council extends it, you could serve both in that case. So, the audit review committee is in charge of overseeing the independent audit, the recommendation for selection of the independent auditor, and the resolution of any audit findings. It's comprised of 4 voting members, 2 council members, and 2 citizens, with 1 citizen who has expertise in the area of accounting, auditing, and financial management. Our current citizen who's serving now does have that expertise, so you can appoint anybody that for the second citizen appointment. However, both volunteers that were included in your packet also have backgrounds in accounting and expertise in those areas. So the 2 volunteers were included in your packet materials, and we're requesting 1 appointment, please.
Thank you. I had an opportunity to speak with Ms. Bardanas, who is one of the people who's put in for this position. She was a former auditor for the state of Nevada. She has extensive background in accounting, And so I would like to nominate her for the position. Are there any other names to be submitted? All right, I'll move to close nominations then.
I'll second.
All right. And with that, then, it would be Mrs. Bardenius, who will be the new member of the Audit Committee. We congratulate her and Ms. Aschenbach, and we will continue to encourage folks for the Allotment Committee. That brings us to item number 10, the City Manager's Report.
Mayor and Council, these are all includes routine items or transactions, and if there's any questions, we certainly have staff available to answer those questions.
Questions or comments? Thank you. We will then move to item number 11, which is our last public comment period. Public comment during this period may be on any item. The time limit remains at 5 minutes, and of course, the request to be civil and concise is always in place. So if there's anyone wishing to speak in public comment, please contact or call the number 702-589-9629.
Yes, I have public comment.
Go ahead.
Yes, good evening, Council. This is Fred Volz. The City Finance Director's narrative regarding the GFOA award omitted a very important facet of complete and transparent financial reporting. For well over a year, there has been in excess of $20 million of budgeted, collected, and unspent utility monies that were to be applied to past utility capital projects. The money has never been reconciled. The city manager has been silent. The finance manager and her people have been silent. The external auditors have done no visible review on their own and failed to find the problem by even performing a spot check of utility capital project spending reported in the CAFR. The external auditors didn't even have the problem brought to their attention by solution-challenged city finance staff for any technical assistance they might offer. And now the people at GFOA have failed to find the problem before giving out an award for questionable financial reporting and a completely opaque status about an enormous pool of utility capital project funds. City staff issued a public spreadsheet identifying the unspent money late last spring at the first Utility Advisory Committee meeting. Rather than subsequently reconciling the money chasm and identifying its current whereabouts, older projects were simply dropped from subsequent versions of the spreadsheet to give the inaccurate appearance that everything is sound. Where is the unspent money now sitting that was collected from Boulder City utility ratepayers? How will it be used in the future? Despite hiring a dedicated capital projects person several months ago, whose job was to untangle the mess, there has been zero reported progress to the public on the festering problem going back several years. Given the material amount of money at stake, it is surprising that all of these trained financial people have such a cavalier attitude toward the whereabouts of other people's money. Even with a 79-page GFOA checklist, GFOA and their agents were unable to detect the problem. Continuing to ignore this obvious problem won't make it magically go away. Competent CEOs address operations problems in a forthright manner rather than repeatedly ignoring them. The award should be returned as inappropriate under the circumstances until city staff figures out and reports to the community on the location of its $20+ million of unspent utility capital project money. More than a few members of this community would hope our city council diligently pursues the matter with city staff to a satisfactory resolution. Perhaps there needs to be an agenda item added to a future city council meeting to bring the necessary official attention to this subject. And in case you were wondering, the Utility Advisory Committee has been unable to secure a clear answer to this problem from multiple city staff despite repeated efforts. And I would ask that these comments be added verbatim to the minutes for this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. The phone line is available. Anyone wishing to comment during the final public comment period? The phone number is 702-589-9629. Anyone wishing to speak in the final public comment period? The phone number is 702-589-9629.
Public comment.
Yes, I'd like to make a public comment.
Go ahead.
Excuse me. This is Judy D. Shane, and I want to thank Mr. Fred Volz for bringing this up and keeping it in the forefront. There are many citizens that would like to know the answer to these questions, so I want to thank him for continuing to keep this in front of the public. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the phone line is available. If anyone else would like to make a comment, the phone number is 702-589-9629. Madam City Clerk, you said that there had been some written comments submitted. Okay, why don't we go ahead with that?
This was submitted by Mary Urashima. As somebody who grew up in Boulder City and regularly visits friends and family there, I watch with interest the actions relating to historic preservation. In addition to my profession as a government consultant, I am a historian and experienced historic preservationist. I viewed the recent council meeting, including discussion on the Historic Preservation Committee's unanimous recommendation for recognition plaques. Plaques recommended by volunteer committees frequently become political at the city council level, in my experience in multiple cities. Yes, there should be clear standards and a transparent process. However, there are also principles regarding community recognition to encourage community-wide efforts. There can be different types of awards for historic preservation, example, built environment, intangible heritage, cultural landscape, student project, etc. You can have one big award with a hard plaque if you choose, but positive reinforcement with recognition certificates is not a harmful action, and in this case, generates public awareness. Denigrating community recognition as participation awards is deflating both for community members who are dedicating their personal time to create recognition programs and also for potential recipients of recognition. I was surprised by the ad hominem comments directed at the Historic Preservation Committee Chair, particularly as the recommendation was unanimously supported in a vote of all 5 committee members per their minutes. The dais should never be used to speak about individuals in that manner. Who will want to volunteer for city boards or committees if they might be criticized by name at a televised meeting? Does the city council not have a code of conduct regarding this? Why did none of the other council members call for a point of order to direct council comments back to a policy level discussion? I think the grassroots historic preservation effort in Boulder City is a positive change. There is a significant amount of work ahead, though, and there will be different ideas about how to go about it. Please make sure the process for evaluating those ideas is objective and open to community input. And that's the only one that was submitted in writing.
Thank you. We'll give a last call on the phone in. The phone number is 702-589-9629.
Public comment.
Yes, my name is Glenn Fan. I'd like to follow up on Mr. Volz's comment. He requested that this item, that looking into this matter about this missing money be put on an agenda, I assume very soon. I would also like to see that happen. I know you cannot respond to this comment, but possibly during your at the end of the meeting, you all get an opportunity to make additional comments on your reports, committee reports. And maybe it'd be nice to hear one of the council people, direct city staff, to put this on an upcoming agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, the phone line is available for our final public comment period. The phone number is 702-589-9629. The phone number again for our final public comment period is 702-589-9629. All right, hearing no others, we'll close the final public comment period and move to our last item, council reports. Mr. Adams?
Thank you, Mayor. I will be attending the Nevada Board of Health's regular meeting on Thursday, so I have nothing new to report on that regard. I will say that as far as the Nevada League of Cities goes, they have unfortunately canceled their annual convention. So it will be digital this year, which is so unfortunate because going last year and having that opportunity to meet so many different individuals who are involved in city governments and being able to talk on things really was a great opportunity for me, especially being so early on into this. I'll never forget some of the people I met from Carlin, Nevada. I met a younger councilman than myself who was from Carlin, so I do think it really is a great opportunity, and it's unfortunate that it will not be able to happen in person, but I am looking forward to it nonetheless. So other than that, I have nothing else to report.
Thank you. Councilmember Bridges?
Yes, two things. First of all, I attended the Southern Nevada Regional Planning Coalition meeting this afternoon. They did call out Lisa LaPlante in terms of the incredible work she's done on promoting the census in Boulder City. Just briefly, in terms of self-reporting response, Henderson is at 72.1%, and we are at 70.4%. Then followed by Mesquite, Las Vegas, and North Las Vegas. Both Nevada and Clark County are currently greater than they were at 2010 at this point in the data collection. Now, they still have to go out and do the field data collection, but we're doing pretty well, and I thought kudos to Lisa. Also, Councilman Knudsen has been sort of charged and looking at what it is the Regional Planning Coalition does and what we will be doing, and it was recommended the possibility of changing us to the Southern Nevada Council of Governments. This comes from a study done by Marion Purdue, and with the current membership and looking at what it is going forward we're going to focus on. There were suggestions of issues that are going to come up like connectivity and redefining what it is we do. So we're all going to look at this. He gave us a second amended and restated interlocal agreement. I'll finish with the NRS says we need to have a regional planning coalition. However, it doesn't say we need to call it the Regional Planning Coalition. So there would be no legal reason why we could not call ourselves something else. And I do remember when I met with Mr. Marion, that was one of the recommendations that he made. So that's where that is right now. And don't make sure we get counted. So I'm wearing my Census 2020 masks, and you might start seeing other members of staff and council. They're all larges, though, so that's it. Thank you.
Councilmember Hoskins?
Yes, I'd like to report that I attended the 18th anniversary drive-by at the Veterans Home this Saturday, and there weren't very many people there, unfortunately. I think it was so hot. It was at 1 o'clock. Had they had it earlier, I think there would have been a lot more, but it was a lot of fun seeing some of the people that I had actually, when I volunteered there, were still working there and able to wave at them, plus the residents. So I had a great time. Thank you.
Councilmember Bolda?
Thank you. As most everyone's aware, school started this week for most of the valley. Some have started last week. So we have most of our little ones back in school, not physically, but with technology. I just want to reiterate that we are looking at the needs for Boulder City. Lots of pop-ups have happened across the valley in supporting children during the day when their parents are at work. so that they can continue their studies at school. We're looking and evaluating our Safe Key program and seeing if we need to continue that and if there's a need in Boulder City. So if you have that need, you can evaluate it this week or next. But we will be speaking about this in our next City Council meeting on September 8th. So please contact the Parks and Rec Department and sign up if that is a need that you have, so we can better evaluate the need of that program. Thank you.
And I would just like to follow up on that too. I know I've been getting emails throughout the week regarding connectivity that I've been forwarding on to Councilmember Folda. If you don't have a connection to the internet, there's an organization that has been developed to do just exactly that. They have the devices. They're free of charge. Please reach out to Councilmember Folda, myself, anyone here at City. We will try and make sure that you get that. Clark County's also been continuing on with the breakfast and lunch programs. This is going to be tough on kids, and whatever we can try and do. This seems to be anniversary time. 100 years ago, women got the right to vote. I always thought that was odd, that my mother was born just like 10 years after the right to vote came around. I thought, really? Some people couldn't vote? So, congratulations. It was too long in coming. Another centennial, this time 104 years, the Park Service is 104 years old. That certainly is a big part of our community with Lake Mead Recreational Area. We have a lot of folks here that contribute to our community that work at the Park Service. The census report. We are only a couple points behind first place. There is still time to do this. I believe it's census2020.gov is the website if you've not done it. Unfortunately, the government has decided to cut short the field work this year. There's still an opportunity. I saw something recently. This is $2,200 per person that's not counted that the state of Nevada would lose out on. So please be counted. It's our schools, it's our roads, it's all those things we need to make sure we're all counted for. And last item I have, we're starting to see, or at least we were starting to see, a decline in the number of cases for COVID-19 virus getting reported. It did start to tick just up a little bit in the last couple days. Folks, the only way we're going to get out of this is by taking care of each other. So please wear your masks, no large gatherings. Let's take care of each other. The sooner we do that, the sooner our economy is going to get back on its feet. So please do that. Please be well. Thank you, and we're adjourned.